Thank you for being here at the 2018 University of Florida Human Trafficking Symposium. This event is put on jointly by two student groups, Gators Against Human Trafficking and the Bob Graham Center for Public Service Student Fellows. We're sponsored by the Graham Center and also another student organization, the National Organization for Women chapter at UF, and also by student government. Thank you all for being here. We have 7, possibly 8 fantastic speakers. Fortunately, Mr. Frank Williams, our assistant U.S. attorney speaker, is still in court, and so I'm not sure he'll be able to make it tonight. But I assure you, the other speakers will make this event well worth your time. Human trafficking is a major issue, not just around the globe, but specifically here in Gainesville, Florida, and in the state of Florida, and in the southeastern United States and beyond. I trust that each of you will come away from this event with just a little more appreciation and hopefully a call to action against this crime. So tonight's events will go in this sort of order. We'll have 2 keynote addresses, one by Savannah Parvu and another by Ms. Lisa Rowe. And then we will follow that by 2 panels, one with government experts and another by nonprofit experts. We have a few prepared questions for each of the panels, but then after that we'll open it up to the audience for your questions. When we're switching between the keynote addresses and the panels, and between the panels themselves, we'll have brief intermissions to reset the stage, bring in new speakers, and I invite you during those times to enjoy refreshments at this side of the room. Again, thank you all for being here. Without further ado, Ms. Savannah Parvu.
Hello. I'm not used to going first, but I'm just going to tell y'all a little bit of my story to give you a better understanding of human trafficking, especially when it has to do with the family. I grew up in Central Florida. I have 2 older brothers that are 8 and 10 years older than I am. And I can remember back to the time when I was around the age of 5 before I started kindergarten. My parents always told me that if I told what happened at home, that I would be taken to a bad place. And I never knew what that was, but I knew not to talk about the things that happened at home. Both of my parents were drug addicts and alcoholics. Like when I started kindergarten, if I wanted to go to school, I had to wake myself up and get myself ready and go to school. And I liked school because like people paid attention to me there. And at home, my mom just slept all the time. But then at night, because my parents were drug addicts, they also sold drugs, and so we had people in and out of the house all the time. I didn't go to sleep at night like a normal 5-year-old does. When I went to sleep, it was after everybody was already passed out. Our neighbor began sexually abusing me when I was around 5 or 6, and my parents knew, but they didn't do anything because his parents were the ones that they rented the house from. So they were afraid that if they did something, then they would lose their house, and also he knew about the drugs that were happening there, or that were being sold there. And when I was around 9, my dad had a stroke that left him disabled, and it was after that that my mom started going out and having an affair because she didn't want to be with my dad anymore. Both of my brothers were already out of the house, and so I eventually went to go live with my mom and whoever she was with at the time. And she was always very open with me about what she was doing. She eventually got hooked on stronger drugs. She started doing crack and pills and whatever she could find. And she started going out and stealing and doing whatever she had to do to get her drugs. And she would take me with her, or she would leave me at home for days to weeks at a time. And when I was 11, my mom started prostituting herself for the drugs. And she would take me with her sometimes, and I knew what she was doing. But then also when I was 11, she sold me for the first time for $10 to her drug dealers. And after that, she told me that now she could just sell me and she wouldn't have to do anything. So after that, she would take me with her and she would drop me off there. They would give her $10 and then they would sell me to other people. Or they would come pick me up and take me and then bring me home when they were done. And during this time, like I didn't want to be there anymore. I didn't want that situation to happen anymore, but I felt like there was nothing I could do because I was always told you don't tell what happens at home. And I still went to school during this time. I remember in like the 8th grade asking my teachers for detention so that I didn't have to go home. And they would give me detention or let me stay, but they never asked why I didn't want to go home. But then when I was 13, I watched both of my parents try to commit suicide by cutting their wrists. And after that, I started cutting myself because I wanted to know what it felt like when they did. And it became an addiction for me. The physical pain took away the emotional pain. And so I developed an addiction of cutting myself. And cutting wasn't as common as it is now. So they thought that I was trying to commit suicide and would Baker act me, and then I would go from group home to group home because they didn't deal with kids like me. And so I ended up going to a residential treatment center for kids in foster care. And while I was there, the staff that worked there, they were friends with each other. And I soon found out that they were also friends with my mom's drug dealers. And so while I was there, I was being sold even more, as well as some of the other girls that were there. And I was there for about 9 months, and then I went to, my oldest brother got custody of me, and he had moved to Lake County. And I started going to school there, but in my mind, I was never going to graduate, I was never going to be anything, I was going to be like my mom, so there was no point in me going to school. So I spent a lot of time in the guidance counselor's office, and we ended up becoming friends, and she would spend time with me and encourage me to go to class, and she just taught me how to believe in myself. And I spent a lot of time with her and her family. They would take me to church with them, and although I didn't like going to church, I liked spending time with them. But I eventually started liking church. But during all of this, I never had counseling for anything that had happened to me. I never told anybody what happened with my mom. But I did end up graduating high school and working and doing great. But there was, I still had a lot of emotional problems, and I was still cutting myself almost 10 years later. And then I started breaking my arm because the cutting wasn't enough to take away the emotional pain. But I finally got help for the cutting and the other self-harm that I was doing. And things were going great. I started talking about the cutting to help other people. And during this time, I had very little contact with my mom. And she was in and out of rehab centers, and in 2013, she had went to a rehab center, and so I went to go visit her, because she just got out, and I've always wanted to have a relationship with my mom. I've always wanted her to be the mom that she should have been. So I went to visit her in 2013 and walked in, and there was a bunch of people there doing drugs, and I was getting raped by 7 people. And so I felt like my past had repeated itself. But I started going to counseling after that, and I started going to a support group for victims of sexual assault. And I realized that all of the things that I felt was so wrong with me, all these years, was actually normal for what I had gone through. And so I went to the support group and went through therapy, and in 2014, I heard about a Human Trafficking Awareness Day in Orlando, and so some of the girls from the group and I went to the event, and it was there that I heard a survivor telling her story, and I remember telling them, like, I could never tell any part of my story. And but then I learned what human trafficking was, and that what my mom did to me was human trafficking. And so after that event, I started talking to my therapist about it. And I wanted to get involved somehow, but I didn't know what I wanted to do because I didn't want to speak. And so I didn't do a whole lot. I started talking to some people about my experience and stuff. But then the first time I spoke, I found that it helped me feel like what I went through is being used for good. I've had people come up to me and tell me that stuff has happened to them, but they never shared their story because they were afraid to. But then hearing me, they were able to speak about it. And then also, it helps, I've found that it helps law enforcement and other people that work with victims to assist them better. And then it also helps bring awareness about what, and it's like gives an example of what human trafficking is. And so that's what I wanted to share with you tonight.
Thank you very, very much. Ms. Lisa Rowe. Thank you.
Savannah, I admire you, and that's why I'm here today. It wasn't easy for Savannah to come to terms with her journey and to stand up here with such courage. It's an honor to be with you. Can we give her another round of applause? And there's some of you in here tonight that can identify with her story, and maybe not the trafficking piece, but the abuse piece. And so I'm going to speak to you from a domestic standpoint of what sex trafficking looks like right here in the United States. And so Savannah's story is not uncommon. 1 out of 3 girls are sexually abused, 1 out of 5 boys, and these are underreported. And that is the major common risk factor for our women and men that are being sex trafficked here. And so, much like Savannah's story, she didn't ask to be sexually abused. She didn't know what that meant. She was so young. And the survivors at Selah Freedom, and I'll share with you a little bit in just a minute, experienced the same exact stories. And what I learned from them is that that is their identity. They don't know anything different. And it's not their own fault. If that's what your image of sex or relationship or love or worth is at 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, that's the definition that is carried through for your entire existence until it's brought to your attention that there's something up with that's not healthy behavior. And so much like what Savannah shared, that is a compounded issue on top of other dysfunctional issues within the home that is creating an unhealthy, chaotic situation for girls and boys to say, the heck with this mess, I'm out of here, I don't want anything to do with this. And they run right out of their front door thinking there's something more. Oftentimes, that's the way that they escape their abuser. And within 24 to 48 hours, they're picked up by a predator that looks like you and me, that is searching for those vulnerabilities. And we hear it time and time again. I thought he was my boyfriend. I thought he was going to take care of me. I thought she wanted more for me. She picked me up. She gave me a place to stay. He bought me my first meal in 24 hours or whatever it was. And the reality was, there's no definition of love. Because if love was sex at 3 years old forcefully, how does buying McDonald's not seem better than that? And that could translate into so many different things. And so I love being on this campus tonight, kind of. I'm a Seminole. Seeing all this blue, but I love what students are doing here because oftentimes this is the age that it catapults, it becomes real. It's like, oh my gosh, this trauma that I've been running from, the chaos that's so familiar to me, all of the sudden it's like, maybe this isn't normal. Maybe this isn't the way life should be. Maybe there's more. And then they turn to people like you and I that say, what can I do? How can I be different? What's next for me? And that's what I love. I get to share with you on the panel tonight about Selah Freedom, but we're a national organization bringing solutions to this problem. We're bringing solutions and answers, and we're helping women to find what their worth is, because nobody helped them. Nobody at 3 years old was saying, I love you, you're worth it, you're smart, you're intelligent. They were doing everything they could to steal that from them. And so we at Selah Freedom just take every woman captive and every heart captive that we meet. We meet them in the jails, we meet them on the streets, we meet them anywhere and everywhere. Because our women believe that they're not worth it, and so if we can meet them where they are, and we can tell them that they are, they begin to trust us. They begin to say, maybe there is more, maybe there's something new, maybe there's something different, maybe there is a lie that I'm believing about myself. And some of our women come into residential treatment, and we love the opportunity to help our women walk that healing journey, because like Savannah said, it takes so much self-care to unravel all of this trauma. Everything that was lied, everything that was chaos, everything that planted themselves in their psyche, they have to walk that out and unravel it and figure out what it is that they're doing here. And we get to do that in our residential program. But our favorite program is our prevention program. And our prevention program speaks to young girls and boys about what health is, what healthy relationships look like. And that's our heart, because if we can get to a girl that is being sexually abused or a boy that is being sexually abused before they run away, before the opportunity for them to be even further traumatized happens, then maybe we can help them choose different for their life. Maybe then they can have a voice. What if Savannah knew that that wasn't healthy? What if somebody had helped her define that before, right? Before mom and dad? What if she knew? Because she didn't. Our survivors don't know that it's not unhealthy. We think that, okay, drugs are unhealthy or the dynamics at home, but we love our parents so much that we're willing to put all of that aside, and I see it day in and day out with our survivors. I was just meeting with a young girl today. She's 22 years old, very similar story to Savannah. Her mom uses drugs. Her dad was absent for a lot of her life, and we got to a hard part in treatment, and she said, I don't want to talk about that. There's nothing wrong, just leave them over there. But then she just started crying and crying and crying, and we paused and we said, okay, what is coming up for you? She's like, I just want to leave them over there. What she was saying was, that's too painful to talk about right now. There's too much in that story that I've pushed aside that I'm not ready to reveal. I'm not ready to really, truly get honest that that was hurtful, because she had to do that for most of her life to survive. She had to, because the pain is all too real. And so if there's something I can get you guys to walk away from, and it's the most common thing that we hear all the time, is that this is happening right here in the United States. It's happening right here on this soil. It's happening right here in this town. It looks different for everybody else, for everyone, but the root is, where did I come from? What was normalized for me? That sexual root that started so early that I had no idea as a child had any harm to me. It was my norm. They walk that out. And you guys have friends in this room. We know people that have that, and yet we say, oh, it's just pornography. Oh, they're just a little promiscuous. You guys can think of all the things that we hear, right? And I want you to leave here tonight not disregarding that anymore. When something feels off for you, it's off. Listen to it. If you're somebody in here that's walked something out that was very traumatizing, I want you to walk away from this knowing that there's help, there's solutions. And I don't want you to feel like you can't ask for that help, because it turns into a lot of different things if we leave it a secret. Secrets hurt. Secrets stress us out. Secrets cause pain. And so it's so important that if you're a friend of somebody or it's you, that you walk away knowing that you don't have to live this, and you don't have to not say something to your friend, right? Some people think it's normal on a Thursday night here in town to go get drunk and have sex with 3 or 4 people, right? That's not normal. There's something that I want you to understand that's deeply rooted. Deeply, deeply rooted. And we've learned in our society that sex becomes objects. People become objects. We're no longer connecting to people relationally. People are objects. People are the next step to whatever I want to accomplish. And so I want us to understand that that's what's happening in our society. Marketing is doing that. Our pornography world is doing it. Sex addiction is real, y'all. It's affecting people's brains the same way heroin does. And so it's so important that we see this as a real issue, not something that's happening internationally, not something that's happening somewhere else, but it's happening here. And you can do something about it. You can be part of the solution as well. And I love that these 2 student groups have come together and said, we want to do something about it. That's awesome. Can we give it up for you guys real quick? And you don't have to be on the front lines with our women or our men. You can be spreading awareness to people that think, oh, I can't tell you how many people I've been in front of that they're like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's normal to sell a woman. It's normal to sell a man. And so I want you to walk away knowing that that's whatever definition that we've given sex trafficking, sexual abuse, sexual exploitation, perversion, pornography, that society has defined that for us, and we no longer have to allow that. We can define it for ourselves and become educated on the cause, and the panelists here tonight are going to do a great job helping you understand that. Awesome? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much to our 2 guest speakers so far. Our 3rd keynote address speaker, we're going to give him just a few more minutes to prepare. He just arrived. So if you'd like, please take a 5-minute break. Please enjoy the refreshments to the side. We'll be back very shortly. Thank you. finish getting food, that's fine. Thank you again for being here. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Frank Williams.
Good evening. I'm Frank Williams. I'm one of your federal prosecutors here in Gainesville. And as I look out across the audience, the first thing I want to say is I'm really humbled. Y'all have some outstanding speakers here on this subject. And it's really wonderful to be a part of this. Thank you very much. What I want to say is I've been here in Gainesville since 1998, and I've had the opportunity to prosecute a number of cases here locally. And a few years ago, I was given the opportunity to prosecute human trafficking cases that are occurring here in our community. That was roughly 3 years ago. And for those of you who haven't heard me speak before, or heard me talk about this, in the last 3 years, do you know how many human traffickers I have prosecuted here in Gainesville? Would you believe 18? How about that? 18, and I have another trial starting next week. So when people ask me, is human trafficking something that's occurring here in our local community, I can tell you, it is. And I also want you to know that it's only the tip of the iceberg as far as the scope of the problem that we have here, not just in our local community, but nationwide. This is a very serious problem. The success of the cases that we have had in the last 3 years, haven't lost a case yet, is that we have what we call a victim-centered approach. Now, a victim-centered approach means that our focus throughout the course of the prosecution and the investigation is to ensure that our victims are receiving adequate and appropriate services. And when we can do that, when we can get those services to the victims, when we can get them into a stable position, and we can get them started in the recovery process, we can prove a case. And we prove it time and time again. But I want you to know this, it's not easy. It's very resource intensive, these prosecutions. And at the same time, in the years that I've been involved with this, what I have learned, probably the most important lesson that I've learned, is that we are never going to investigate and prosecute human trafficking away. It's never going to happen. The answer to human trafficking, if we're sincerely going to do something about this, is we're going to have to do a better job of helping people understand what it is. We're going to have to help people to understand. We're going to have to improve awareness about human trafficking. And that is the key to stopping human trafficking. Human trafficking, if you don't already know this, but it's been around since the dawn of man. And it's nothing different. We've called it by a lot of different names, like slavery. And so if we really are going to make a difference here, doesn't it make sense to you that we try something different? That we take a different approach to tackling this evil? And I want to tell you, I believe that I found the key. The key is we have to eliminate the market. We can spend all of our time and invest all of our energy in helping people to recover from the evil of human trafficking. And believe me, that takes a lot of resources. And very often, I'm sad to tell you, we're not successful. But doesn't it make a lot more sense that we do more about stopping human trafficking to begin with? Now, let's all be honest with each other. What is the root cause of sex trafficking? What is it? It's men. It's men buying sex. That by far is the greatest cause for human trafficking. And what efforts are we taking there as far as educating men and preventing men from buying sex? I mean, we live in a world and at a time where our culture promotes an idea that it's all right to buy sex. That the victims of human trafficking are not really victims at all. And that they're not being harmed by what's happening, that they volunteer for this lifestyle. But let me tell you something, nothing could be further from the truth. It's a lie that we've been sold and that we continue to buy again and again. I've had an opportunity to prosecute child sex trafficking and adult sex trafficking cases. And I've met hundreds of women that have been involved in prostitution. And you know, the one thing that I have found in all the women that I have met with and discussed this with is that every one of them began this lifestyle when they were children. But when they turned 18 years of age, we no longer considered them to be trafficking victims. And for many years, we actually treated children in the same manner. But now they are something different. Now they're prostitutes. And that's the reality, folks. We have to change that misconception that we all have about who these victims are and why they are caught up in this horror of trafficking. And that misconception, by the way, doesn't just go with the public. It goes with law enforcement. It permeates prosecution. All these agencies have that common misconception. I hear it very, very often. So we have got to dispel that. We've got to eliminate that misconception. We've got to be, nothing is going to do more to eliminating this evil than being honest with ourselves, than speaking the truth to this. And if we do that, and if we make men realize what it is that they're doing when they buy sex, and the harm that they're causing, the fact that there are human beings involved in this with emotions and feelings who don't elect this life, then I think we're going to go a lot farther than me going to court every day and presenting these cases one at a time. It's just not going to work, folks. So we've got to really rethink this. I'm here today because I really want to speak to what I believe is the heart and soul of human trafficking, and that is the evil of men buying sex. Whenever I speak in these audiences, and I've done a lot of speaking on this over the years, it's always peculiar to me that when I look out over the audience, there's one thing I don't see very much of. I see a little bit more of it here than I normally would. Do you know what that is? Men. Men are the heart and soul of this issue. Well, where are the men? Where are the men? For the men that are here today, thank you for being here. And if you're a woman, I ask you, please at some point go up, pat them on the shoulder, say, hey, thank you for being here today. Because men, by the way, men love encouragement like that. So please take the time to do that. Thank them for being here. But we need more men in this fight against sex trafficking. We need a lot more men. And by the way, men, women don't need to be led on this issue. Women don't need us men to be in front of them on this issue. You know where they need us? Right beside them. Right beside them. That's where we need to be. Because that's the only way that we're going to tackle this issue. But most men, by the way, would like to be in the front too. But that's not where we need to be on this. We need to be alongside women. So that's really the message that I wanted to share with you here today. And I also wanted to share this message with you. Every one of you here tonight is here for a reason. It's just not a coincidence that you're here. You're here for a reason. What is that reason? This is a call to action for you. This is an opportunity for you. When I see all these young faces, I love to come here because it kind of reinvigorates me. I get a little bit more enthusiastic about this because I know there really is hope. And you are that hope. Your energy, your enthusiasm, we need you. And this is a cause that is worthy of everything you have. This is a cause that's worthy of the best that you have to offer. This is your time. You were put here at this time and in this moment to make a difference in the world. And this is a cause that is calling out to you. It's real, and it's happening right here in our community. So I'm appealing to you. trafficking, labor and sex trafficking. We can do it, but we are not going to do it unless we do it together. That is another thing that I have learned about dealing with human trafficking. It's going to take a team effort. It takes a team. And that means all of us working together in every aspect of this, from victim services, public awareness, law enforcement, investigation, prosecution, all of us working together. We really can make a difference. I would love to say that I live in a community that not just where culture meets nature, which I have some issues with, but wouldn't you love to live in a community where you know our children are safe? How about Gainesville, Florida, a community that loves and nurtures its children, a community that cares for the weak and vulnerable? Don't you want to live in a community like that? Because I do. That's the community that I want to raise my family in. And you know, when people see you, when they see the example that you set, by speaking out on this subject, being honest with, especially men, you are going to make a difference. When we do these cases, a lot of times, especially with law enforcement, it's easy to become callous. It's easy to feel overwhelmed. Sometimes it's like a tsunami that just engulfs you. And so what I say to the investigators is, every time we take one of these traffickers off the street, every time we help one of these victims, you know what we did? We changed the world. We changed the future. Because not only did we help to protect and restore that one victim and all the victims that will be harmed by that trafficker, but everyone that will ever be in their life, every relationship that they will ever have, every child that they will ever have, we changed their world. That's the challenge in front of us. Don't become discouraged by the scope of the problem, because it is tremendous. But be encouraged by the hope that there are so many others, like all of us here in this room, that really want to do something about this. And we have the courage and the stamina and the willpower to take action, to actually step forward and do something, and not just give this lip service. So that is my message to you today. It's one of hope and encouragement, and it's one of hopefully some inspiration. When I look here at some of your guests and your speakers, it fills my heart with inspiration, because I know the strength and the courage that they have and that they demonstrate every day fighting this cause. Isn't it only right for us to step forward and lock arms with them, encourage them, and join them in this effort? Isn't that only right? You're here now at this moment in time for a reason. The feeling that you have in your heart, it's there for a reason too. So my message to you is follow through with it. Take action, step forward. That's really all I have to say. I guess I want to say, do they have questions? Because that's normally what I do, but I probably don't have time for that.
We'll have panels.
We have a panel. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. At this time, one 60-second break for us to set up stage. If you would, just stay tight in your seats. We'll have our panel of government experts before you in just a moment. Thank you.
are very grateful for their help and for making this event better than last year, and for hopefully in the future making this event better and better every year. So without further ado, we'll have our panelists introduce themselves.
You already know me.
I'm Nicole Ferranti. I'm a family services specialist with the Department of Children and Families.
My name is Anorine Ledet. I'm a special agent with the Department of Homeland Security here in Northeast Florida.
So we have prepared a few questions just to get the ball rolling. How did you get involved in the fight against human trafficking, and what is your role in the fight? Anyone of you can answer the question?
All right, I'll start. I've been working victim-centered investigations for probably about 15 years now. I've been in federal law enforcement for over 25 years, so pretty much most of my career doing these types of cases. And when I first got to Northeast Florida about 10 years ago, I was the first certified undercover in cyber crimes against children for our office here in Jacksonville. And at that time, 10 years ago, human trafficking wasn't in the forefront of the media and everything that we see as much as we see it now. When my agency finally played catch up, they came to me and they said, you probably have the most experience doing these types of cases. Do you think that you could take on the trafficking cases and see if you can have any success with that? So I got out the law books. I started reading about what I needed to get a successful prosecution, and that's how I ended up being somewhat of a subject matter expert for my agency in the Northeast Florida area.
My process was pretty similar. I had worked for the Department of Children and Families for about 11 years as an investigator, and my agency came to me one day and said, hey, there's this 3-day training on commercial sexual exploitation of children. Do you want to go? When you're an investigator, the answer to that question is always yes. It means it's a day without taking cases and almost like a mini vacation. Doesn't really matter what the subject is, you go. I went and I found that I was very interested in the subject matter. I'd always been interested in abnormal psychology. I got my undergraduate degree here from the University of Florida in psychology, and I'd always had an interest in abnormal psych. And so I, particularly sexual abuse, so a lot of the other maltreatments I could understand. I could understand physical abuse and how parents lose their temper. I could understand neglect, but I could never really understand sexual abuse. And during the 3-day training, they started teaching us about what we now call human trafficking. And I started thinking about all of the cases involving my teenagers that I had worked over the years. And as we were going through the indicators and the red flags, it dawned on me that we'd missed a lot. There were a lot of cases where we had kids and teens that were likely being trafficked, and we just didn't know. And we didn't do anything to help them. So after that training, and I remember there was one particular moment, there was a law enforcement detective in the room with me, and we had both worked with one teen for a long period of time, and it just dawned on both of us at that moment that, we had missed the mark. So moving forward, it made me very interested in the topic of human trafficking. I volunteered to go to as many trainings as I could. I was shortly thereafter promoted to supervisor, and I made it a point with my agency for my personal involvement with those cases that came in our area, where I would personally work those cases or at least supervise them. And that's sort of how I got the ball rolling, and I became personally involved in the fight.
In 1992, I prosecuted a case. It was a murder case, and the victim was 10 years old. Her name was Melody Cooper. And Melody Cooper, I never met her. I didn't know her at all. did come to know her through the witnesses in the case. And the person that killed her was given the death penalty. That girl, Melody Cooper, changed my life. And ever since that time, I have had a heart for cases that involve children being abused. And ever since that time, I've done all that I can to stop the types of things that I saw happening to our kids, including Melody. And when you do cases like this over the years, what happens is people know you're the person to come to and talk to about these cases. That's one of the challenges of these cases. So over the years, I did more and more and more cases that involved child victims. And with the advent of the internet, I saw that the scope of the problem was getting a lot worse. So I did a large number of cases involving the sexual exploitation of children through technology like the internet. Production child pornography, receiving child pornography, child enticement cases, one after the other after the other. In 2006, I became the coordinator for North Florida for Project Safe Childhood. And I was doing so many of these enticement cases. And when I say enticement, you're probably familiar with these operations where when law enforcement sets up a house, they act like they're children online, and then people come to the house, solicit the kids for sex. I'm sure you're familiar with those cases here. It's gotten a lot of publicity. There was even a TV show about it, right? And what I came to understand is the scope of this problem is huge. The fact that you could set up an operation and people understood that law enforcement was out there, and yet so many men would still continue to pursue children. It was staggering to me. How could there be so many? Some of them again and again and again. Even after we prosecuted them one time, here they come back again in another case, another operation. But what it told me is that this is a really serious problem. And these men were they were willing to pay for children. I mean, anything that they could do to obtain kids. And so I knew the scope of this problem, sex trafficking of children, was extreme and serious. So with the help of some law enforcement officers that had the same feelings I did and passion for this, we really began to start doing something about this, pursuing these cases, just a few years ago. And we met with a lot of success. So that's how I became involved in this prosecution of sex trafficking. So it's been a while. I dated myself by telling you I started in '92 a little bit, but that's it.
Our next question is, what are the largest barriers you have encountered to the successful investigation and prosecution of traffickers?
I think we could all probably answer this the same, and it's just a lack of resources. These investigations are very involved from across a number of agencies, and Frank alluded to earlier, successful prosecutions come with victim stabilization, and that is the hardest part. We can find the evidence all day long to actually have the findings of a case, to verify a case with DCF or with law enforcement, but putting the services in to stabilize those victims is what creates the greatest challenge. There's not enough funding attached to the laws are being passed, and they're great, but they come with mandates for DCF and other agencies with no funding behind it. And there seems to be just this common idea out there that when it involves a child, call DCF, they have the answers, they have the services, and that's not the case. There's very limited placements for these kids. There's very limited specialized treatment for these kids, and so from my standpoint, working with child victims, it comes down to appropriate services, funding for those services. We also don't do a good job addressing some of the things that we talked about earlier in that dysfunction within the household. we're trying to solve this very convoluted problem by dealing with only one piece of it, and that's providing services to the child. We offer services to these families, but usually by the time it gets to us, the families are so tired of the child's behavior that they view it as it's them, not me. And unless we have a dependency case, we've taken that child into custody, we have no court backing. We don't have really anything to force these families to address that inherent dysfunction. And so we sort of only address half of the problem. Even when we send kids to a safe harbor placement where they get that intensive specialized treatment, we're really not addressing the problem within the household, and then 6 months, 8 months later, the kids are going right back home to the same environment, that same dysfunction, the same reasons that they felt they had to run away to begin with, and the cycle just starts all over again.
Well, and I kind of feel like I always get put in this position to remind people, when you're talking about trafficking, obviously sex trafficking is on the forefront. It's what's in the media, it's the glamorous thing, it's sexy, that's what people hear about. For me, it's both sides of the coin. And I actually looked it up on the way over here because I wanted to be correct in my statistics. The Florida State Department of Commerce revenue statistics for Florida, the biggest part of Florida's income, 51% is from agriculture and 43% is from tourism. So in every aspect of what generates revenue for the state of Florida, you have the propensity for a trafficking situation to occur. You're talking about agricultural workers, you're talking about restaurant workers, massage parlors, basically anybody that holds a job in the two highest revenue generating fields for the state of Florida can potentially be a trafficking victim. That's pretty high numbers for a state. And for people, because I work cases all the time and they're like, what do you mean there's trafficking in Jacksonville? I'm like I rescued a guy the other day out of a field who was not being paid a fair wage. He had to use the bathroom in a bucket. He didn't have protective gear to work in a field. His money was being taken away from him. All of those things are criteria to make someone a labor trafficking victim. And when I rescued him, I had no place to put him. You know, it's gonna be across the board probably for everybody sitting up here. You know, the resources are just not there. But I think a lot of it is the awareness of society too, what actually brings someone to that point as well. And I just hope that you guys take away from this that, you know, the guy working at the 7-Eleven, you know, it could be anywhere. Just keep that in mind.
I don't want to sound discouraging to you, but I want to tell you that there is a need at all levels in dealing with this issue. At all levels. Victim services, law enforcement, prosecution, community awareness. There is a need at all. I wish I could tell you that in one area we're strong and in other areas we're not. We're weak across the board. And this is an issue that's just crying out for leadership. It's just crying out for your involvement. That's the reality. That's the realities here in the state of Florida. I mean, I can speak to needs in all of those different areas in what I see. So.
And then our third question is, what is a misconception you think people have when it comes to human trafficking?
There's a lot. There's a lot. One prevalent one is it's not here, not in my community. That's one misconception. Another very common misconception is they choose to do that. That's what they choose to do. They're not really victims. They elected to do that. That was their choice. That's a very common misconception.
Well, and in my cases, for example, with the labor trafficking cases, a lot of the people that are preyed upon are the indigent, the homeless, So when we take someone out of a situation that's a trafficking situation and we're trying to find services for this person, most people go, well, he didn't have a place to live before. I mean, he's got a place to live now. And it's like, he's going to the bathroom in a bucket. I mean, that's not normal. You know, no human being should have to live that way. But the misconception of general society, it's like, well, he's in a better place than he was before. No, he's not. He's not even getting one meal a day. You know, and it's eye-opening to hear some of the stories that I'm sure probably all three of us, we could probably keep you here all night with the atrocities that we run into working these types of cases. But it starts with awareness, and we're glad you're here.
There's one other misconception that I want to mention, and that's one that I hear pretty often is, well, what can I do about this? I can't make a difference with this. Yeah. I hope none of you suffer from that misconception. I hope that you don't suffer, because you can make a difference. I mean, I have seen the difference that people can make when they really are willing to step forward and do something about this. People right here in our community, and there's a lot of them.
So now we'd like to open the floor for any audience questions.
Yes, if you'd like to come up to the front, if anyone has a question, please feel free to just walk up to the... Oh, what's that? No, it works better if people come up, sorry. Yeah, if you would, please do one at a time, that would be great. There we go.
Or if you have a loud voice like I do, we probably can hear you from back in the room.
Hi, first off, thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to come and speak with us about this issue that is so important. You had mentioned earlier about changing the culture to prevent human trafficking from even happening. What can we do as young people and as students at UF to change the culture in our communities and spheres of influence so that this doesn't happen?
That change starts with you. When you witness or see something that you know is wrong, that contributes to these misconceptions that people have, it's up to you to stop and say, hey, no, that's wrong. That's not acceptable to me. That's not something that I agree with. For example, this pimp culture myth that we have here in our society about pimp my ride, or I'm gonna have my, like being a pimp is something glamorous, and something that people should aspire to, something that we should emulate. Well, that's a bunch of crap, okay? Because I have dealt with pimps, and to me, there's no lower life form than somebody who's a pimp. And that's the last thing that I would want to emulate, or anyone, especially my children or any young people. This is not something that we want in our community. It's not something to be admired. It's the lowest form of life. It's about taking someone else and making money off of them while they're on their back. I mean, that's the reality of it. And it really disturbs me when we glamorize it. And I'm sorry, but when you have someone who comes and does a presentation, that their background is that they were a successful pimp, and you allow them to get into the local community and speak to their youth, what is that saying? By the way, if you go to any of the local markets here, especially on the east side of town, and if you go in there, what you'll see is you'll see like CDs that are being given out by people, in the music industry. Pick up one of those CDs and listen to it. Pick one of those CDs up and listen to it. That's the music that you hear as people are driving around. Listen to those lyrics and what they're saying. And you tell me that that's acceptable. And what kind of a message is that to our youth? I mean, be real. Let's be honest with them. I'd love to sit down with a kid and tell them what a pimp really is and what they do and how they make their money. And it's not something that we want to promote. So, you know what, though? That takes a little bit of courage because you have to step forward and say, no, I don't accept that. I'm not going to watch this program. I'm not going to promote this music. I'm not going to promote this person or that message. That's what it takes. That's what it's going to take. That's a huge job. You know, I know one of you isn't going to step forward and do that and change our culture. Okay? But it's something we really got to be honest about. And that's what I was talking about earlier, about speaking the truth to this problem. We've got to be honest about what this is and the harm that it causes others. And in the absence of that truth, this is never going to go away. I'm not saying it's easy. Well, by the way, like I said, it's been since the dawn of man that we've been having this. But aren't we intellectual enough now? Aren't we successful enough as Americans? Look at all the things that you have and the success that you've enjoyed. You know, isn't it time for us to be honest about this? If we're really going to, we live in a really fascinating time. I do see a lot of cultural change taking place. I think it's wonderful what I see happening, especially with women stepping forward and talking about the abuse that they've suffered, which has gone on for, again, probably since the dawn of man. This is a great time. So let's continue that effort, that same effort, and be honest and speak truth to this problem. If each one of us does that, especially men, and men, I hate to keep picking on you, but pornography, no. No. Pornography is harmful. It's hurtful to you, and it's harmful and hurtful to women. And it's not something that is acceptable. It's just not. And I see time and time again the harm of pornography. If you really boil it down to some of the root evils that are perpetuating this myth about what human trafficking is, right there at the core level, pornography is right there. So let's be straight about what pornography really is and the harm that results from it. And don't be so delusional, men, that this is not hurting you, because it is. It's hurting you. Next.
Further answer your question, I would say open your eyes. A lot of people are like, what's she talking about, open my eyes? You see what's going on around in your world, but you may not really see it. And what I mean by that is I've had tips come to me from, little old ladies that went and got their nails done, and they said, they were treating this one girl really bad, and she seemed really scared, and we didn't know what to do, so we called the local law enforcement, and they said to report it to this tip line, and we were afraid, but we just thought that something had to be done. And it was because they had their eyes open. Most of us have that level in our head, that little switch, and when you see something and it's not quite right, you're like, that was weird. Was that just me? Did you see that? I've had people do that to me. Keep your eyes open. And if you want to go a step further, there are coalitions all over the state of Florida. And what these coalitions do is bring people together from different entities, law enforcement, nonprofit, religious organizations, and they fill the holes of what's missing in resources. So it's whether somebody might have a place for somebody to stay that really needs it, or clothing, or furniture, or whatever the case may be, somebody needs therapy. Those coalitions are a network of people that are out there that really want to do something about the problem and are trying to help people like us do something about it. So that's another way that the community can get involved if you really want to go a step further than just keeping your eyes open.
Thank you very, very much. I'm afraid that's all we have time for this panel. We're going to move on to the next one. Could I have a round of applause for our guest speakers? Thank you very, very much. And I'd like to invite to the stage our nonprofit experts on human trafficking.
Thank you again for everyone showing up. We're very pleased to have you all here. My name is Megan Pitt. I'm a sophomore in political science and economics and a Bob Graham Center student fellow. Alongside me here are people who have worked in the sphere of non-government organizations, and they each have a unique and important role in fighting human trafficking. If you all could kindly introduce yourselves.
My name is Lisa Rowe. I'm the Vice President of Programming and Operations for Selah Freedom.
My name is Alison Ungaro, and I'm the Executive Director for Created Gainesville, a local nonprofit.
My name is Jerome Elam. I am President and CEO of Trafficking America Task Force.
My name is Savannah Parvu, and I am the Survivor Advocate for Florida Abolitionists.
My name is Richard Tovar, and I'm the President of FIGHT, which stands for Fighting Justice and Global Human Trafficking. We're a local nonprofit that's raising awareness about human trafficking.
All right. Well, my first question for you guys is, when and why did the issue of human trafficking become so important in your life?
Go down the line. When I was 27, I was staring at my 6-month pregnant belly and my husband, who was about to walk out the door, and he told me, I'd been cheating on you our entire marriage, and I didn't realize the depth of my trauma history at that point, and I sunk onto my knees and went through a lot of healing myself to learn how codependent I had become because of my childhood, being raised with an alcoholic dad and a codependent mom. What really got me interested in the fight against sex trafficking is my husband's addiction at the time to pornography and to women and to sex was so beyond anything I ever could imagine, and it was like we talked about, like I didn't know to ask these questions. There were red flags around me all over the place and I had no idea. And I quickly realized how much I could identify with a woman who would tolerate a lot of things because I didn't know any different. And my first therapy group with our women at Selah, I very much resonated with their self-worth, their discovery of understanding who their self-worth was. And so I've enjoyed that journey for the last 3 years.
I would have to say that my journey with getting started with Created Gainesville started also in pregnancy. I was pregnant with our 5th baby, and I was at church and they played a video from Project Rescue out of India, and the ages of the kids on the screen were the ages of my kids. And the reality just hit that this is a real issue. The images flashed in my mind of at ages when somebody should be protecting these kiddos, they are being exploited and sold. And so that day changed my life from that point on, and I knew that I was supposed to be part of restoration and hope and healing. And shortly after that, I connected with an organization called Created in Tampa, where we were founded. And I got to hear a story of a woman who Created had met on the streets of Tampa and what her journey was like being trafficked on the streets of Tampa. And all the misconceptions that I had about vulnerability and exploitation here in the United States just got squelched. The reality, the lights went on for me that this is happening in my own backyard. This town where I came to study as a Gator and have driven these streets for years, just not recognizing where women are being exploited in our community. So that point on, I set forth just to learn more about the exploitation of women in our community, connected with law enforcement and other organizations, and Created Gainesville is committed to reaching and restoring women here in our community that are looking for a way out, and we meet them where they're at.
Human trafficking ravaged my childhood. From the age of 5 to the age of 12, I was sexually trafficked. My mother was an alcoholic, pregnant at 17. She was targeted by a sexual predator who romanced his way into our lives. After he'd been together with my mother for 6 months, he began to molest me. 6 months later, began to use child pornography. And several months later, he introduced me to the pedophile ring he belonged to, where I began to be trafficked 10 to 12 times a day. This lasted for 7 years of my life. I tried to tell a total of 10 people, including a doctor. No one listened to me. At the age of 12, I was filled with a sense of hopelessness and worthlessness that I felt like my life didn't mean anything. I took a bottle of sleeping pills from my mother's medicine cabinet and a bottle of vodka, went to my mother's favorite rose garden, laid down, took the pills, drank the vodka, and drifted off to sleep. It was at that time that someone or something spoke to me and said, you know, your time's not up. You need to go back and fight for every child who's suffering as you have. I woke up in the emergency room. I had been gone for a total of 3 minutes. Since that day, I've been filled with hope and inspiration in my heart. It took me taking my own life for me to get noticed by social services and by the ER doctors. And I went on to put my life back together, joined the Marine Corps at the age of 17. I started Trafficking America Task Force to bring my voice and to be a voice for male victims who compromised an almost equal number to female victims who were trafficked. And I am blessed every day of my life to be able to fight for every victim is trapped in silence.
I became passionate about getting involved with human trafficking when I learned what it was, and that's what happened to me, because if I knew sooner, I would have been able to start healing sooner.
I've been involved with the fight against human trafficking since about 2009, but it wasn't until 2013 when I had the opportunity to go to Southeast Asia, to Cambodia, and I was working with an organization trying to rescue some of these kids in these brothels. And it wasn't until that night that I saw slavery for the first time. I mean, we study slavery in school, we learn about it, but more from a historical point. But when you see it, when you see a child being sold for $10, $20 for the whole night, beautiful kids, 20, 30 in a room. I was talking to a group of students at Santa Fe last weekend. I wish you guys could be there with me, because when you see something like that, you cannot do anything else but do something about it. Honestly, it changed me. I know that I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life, because not just because it's the right thing, but because it's needed. I mean, I agree 100% with Frank, and the need to change our society. The young woman that spoke and said, what can we do? We really need to do something, people. I was telling them last week that this is not a joke. You know, this is not just it's not for show. You know, all of us here, we're not doing this just because for show, because, we're going to get attention, right? We're talking about people's lives that are being changed in a negative way every day. We have to do something. There is an urgency to change our society. And that's what we're all here, I think. And if you ask me why I do this, it's because I saw it with my eyes, and I just cannot forget. You know, there's days that I go to sleep and I remember, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to do more. I cannot just be content with living my life, my great life here, and not doing something about it. So.
Thank you all for sharing. Now, could you please explain what your organization does to care for and advocate for the victims?
So as I mentioned, I'm with Selah Freedom. We're a national organization, and we believe in a 4-arm model. And so we believe in awareness, and I think you've heard that a lot tonight. Just helping people understand the issues right here in our community. A lot of people want to get involved. A lot of people don't know what's going on, and so that's very important to us. Our second arm is our prevention arm. I spoke about this a little bit earlier, but we believe that if we can reach our families and our youth before they launch into their adult years, we can help them. We can help them understand what this is. They can help their friends. We can educate parents. A lot of times these are generational things. If a parent's been sexually abused, and it's become a secret, and there's shame and guilt connected to it, if their child then is sexually abused, they then want to keep it a secret because that's what they know to do. And so we really want to get into the hearts and minds of those parents, educators, social workers, therapists, anybody and everybody that'll listen to us, but definitely our children. We have an outreach arm, and I love the representation here from law enforcement and our courts, because that's what we do in our outreach arm. We meet our women where they're at, and then we help them along their journey wherever that is, and it takes a team. So we help to educate law enforcement so that they stop seeing women and men as prostitutes, as criminals, and they start seeing them as victims of their circumstances, victims of their childhood. Stop seeing them as people that want to be out there, but people that are being abused and taken for granted and really coerced and manipulated out there. And we'll walk alongside. For us, it's our women, and we know that it takes 7 points of contact typically before our women will trust us. And so we have just selfless employees on the front lines helping those women trust us, so that hopefully they'll choose to come into our residential arm, which is our 4th arm, and it's a 12 to 18-month program, and our whole hope is that we would help women integrate into the community successfully, and along that journey learn who they are, become hopeful, restore their joy, and really help them clear all the trauma that they've been walking in. And I can't tell you how many times we encounter survivors who tell us, I didn't know I was being trafficked, that was my boyfriend. And so it's an educational journey as well. So that's what we do at Selah Freedom.
At Creative Gainesville, our heartbeat is to go to the places where women are being exploited. So we have a high focus on outreach. We do outreach on the streets of Gainesville, meeting women who are out there involved in prostitution. We also visit a local strip club and build trust and relationship there, as well as in our local jail. We have a class that we do every Friday morning at the jail, and it's a transitional program for women who have been trafficked, and our hope is to be able to bridge the gaps. What we find a lot is that, like was mentioned already tonight, is that this cycle tends to repeat itself. And so maybe a woman finds herself in jail, and then she's approaching her release date, but she doesn't have anywhere to go. And typically within a day, if that, she's already back in the control of her trafficker and right back where she started. And so our hope is that we can build a relationship with women where they are, and to be able to create a plan with her so that when she leaves the jail or when she's trying to escape her situation, that we can help her form a plan together and walk beside her as she's doing that. And it takes so much courage, so much courage. It's something that I have just been so in awe of in this work, is seeing the resilience, the courage, and the determination of women to get out of the situations that they have been in and to start a new chapter of their lives. One of the things that we are able to offer is restorative care. So that's kind of the second arm of what we do. And we provide housing assistance for women. We also provide trauma counseling, sobriety support, life coaching, job readiness skills, and just community. There's something so powerful about being part of a group of women where we're all on a journey together towards healing and restoration. So there's so much power to join a circle of women who, our stories are, none of them are the same, but to be able to say, oh my gosh, like if she went through that and she was able to do that, I can do that too. And for women to speak into each other's lives and to be each other's greatest support system is one of the most beautiful things that I get to see on a daily basis. One of our goals in this year is to open our first phase of our residential program here in Gainesville. And as was stated multiple times before, our greatest need in Gainesville is a place to take women. Right now, there really aren't a lot of options. So we've taken women to Selah Freedom. We've taken women to Wellspring Living in Georgia. We've taken women to Tampa. And sometimes we call all these amazing programs and there's no bed available. And that's the most heartbreaking place to be with a woman, is to just hear her desperation to see, like, if she had an opportunity, if she had a safe place to go, that she truly could have everything that she needs to be able to completely change her life. So our mission in this year is to be able to open a residential program very similar to Selah Freedom, and to be able to welcome women home into safety and to support, and give them space to be able to heal from the things that they've encountered and walked through.
At Trafficking American Task Force, we train federal, state, and local law enforcement, as well as medical and mental health professionals, on how to recognize victims. And we also try to be a voice for both survivors and victims, especially from my own background, a voice for male victims of human trafficking, to be a voice for the LGBTQ community. Boys and LGBTQ are two of the most underserved populations in the human trafficking arena. So we try and connect people with services. We had a young transgender individual about 8 months ago who was on the run from their trafficker that had a $10,000 bounty on their head. So we're able to get them help through Cyndi Lauper's foundation, which is called True Colors, which does phenomenal, amazing work in helping LGBTQ have a place where they can go and feel safe. But most of all, I try and help put a face on what a human trafficking victim is, because one of the really sad facts is that the majority of victims of human trafficking don't know they're victims of human trafficking. I can't tell you how many people come to me and say, "Oh my gosh, I read your story. I didn't realize I was a victim of human trafficking until I read your story," because it becomes your normal. As has been spoken about before here, I came from an environment where alcoholism, child abuse, domestic violence were rampant. So that was my normal. And so being trafficked was just a parallel move, a continuum of that normal. So I didn't know any different. In fact, as has been touched upon, when I was being trafficked, you're given the attention you so desperately crave. As a child, I was so desperate for attention, like a drowning man's desperate for oxygen. So when you're a child in a situation, someone comes along, smiles at you, gives you a gift, they immediately have you. One of my friends works with victims in Atlanta and spoke to a quote-unquote reformed human trafficker, and she asked him what he looks for in a victim, and his reply was that they're breathing. He said that she could point to any young girl walking by and you could have her on the street in an hour. So this is the arrogance we're dealing with. But again, the most powerful weapon we have is education, and one person can make a difference. The most, excuse me, the most prolific sex trafficking ring to date in the U.S. was run out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. 24 states, including Canada. Run by 3 generations of the same family, the Evans family. Multi-million-dollar trafficked individuals from age 12 and 14 on. The only way they were brought down was a very sharp police officer pulled over 2 young girls in a car. Noticed they had fake IDs, and from that point on, that organization began to unravel. So each of us can make a difference. If we could spend an hour learning CPR to save the life of 1 child, we could spend an hour learning the subject of human trafficking to save the lives of 10, 100, 1,000 children.
We do a lot of community outreach, and we also do hotel outreach, because a lot of human trafficking happens in the hotels and in Orlando, where all the tourism is. And so we go and teach them about signs of human trafficking, and we also talk to them about where their employees come from, because a lot of them hire through a contractor, and those workers are victims of labor trafficking. So we go to the hotels and inform them about human trafficking. Then we also do demand prevention, and we also run the human trafficking hotline in Central Florida. All the calls come through the Florida Abolitionist.
Our main goal is going to be prevention. We basically are in the line of thought with what Frank was talking about, which is if we really want to stop this problem, we need to really get to the root of the problem, which is we really buy sex in our society. We buy so much sex. When somebody was asking a question earlier, all I can think is how we normalize our culture. How many of you guys have watched that movie, Hangover? Just raise your hand, everybody. Come on, you watch it. All right. So it's a funny movie, right? You guys like it? It's pretty hilarious. Blah blah blah. Okay. Now, what we don't realize is that in that movie, the premise is the day before you get married, the day before or the week before, you're gonna basically give your vows and say, I'm gonna spend the rest of my life with you because I love you. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? We're gonna go to a strip club. We're gonna hire a stripper, and that's how I'm gonna honor my vows, by doing that before. And you know what? Society completely buys into it. I was at a friend's house earlier this summer, and it's a guy that just got married at the end of the year. And they're all talking, all his friends were there from college, and somebody talked about, okay, what are you gonna do for the bachelor party? And they start talking about strippers and stuff, and the fiance was there. And she tells them, guys, you can do it, just make sure he doesn't do anything stupid. Of course, they didn't know what I was going to say. They didn't know any better. I was like, are you serious? Is that what you really want from your future husband? I mean, it was supposed to be fun and light and cool and stuff. Everybody was, now it got real. When you ask, how do I change my culture? This is what you need to do. You need to make those uncomfortable conversations. Why is it completely normal? Why? Because it's fun? Come on, we're talking about people's lives as one. Like, yeah, I mean, when you flip your husband, it's horrible. But you know, he got there, and you know why, right? Because it wasn't like one day to the next day. It was a whole series of actions that led him to do that. You know, and that's what we are. We're telling people we need to do something. My generation, we dropped the ball. Frank's generation, we dropped the ball. You guys have the ability to do something different. You guys can say, we're not gonna put up with this. We're gonna do something different. And that's what we try to tell our people. That's what our goal is to like really make a change in our generation, in your generation, that says we will no longer stand for this. We're gonna do things different. Because it's right. And that's what we do. That's what we do in campus. We go to different college groups. That's what we want to do. That's what we want to change it from the bottom, from the people that actually, make a change so there's no more victims. So there's no more people that are going to be victimized because we just want to have fun. That's kind of what we do. I'm sorry. It's just when people, I just get very passionate about it because it does affect us. I've seen it. I've seen how bad it is. And I don't want it to be here in the United States or in our community, which happens already. Sorry, talk forever. I guess I can continue talking. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Thank you all for sharing. I'd like to open up the floor for any audience questions.
Hi, everyone. In my line of work, I work with survivors of human trafficking a lot, but I don't think it's uncommon on a college campus for any of the students here to run into someone who has been trafficked. So what advice can we give the people in the room to direct women to here in Gainesville? Where can we direct them?
You are welcome to direct them to Creative Gainesville. We have all of our contact information up on our website, which is www.creativegainesville.com, and definitely utilize us. If you think that there's a woman that is in a situation that she is not wanting to be in and needs some support, maybe she's not there yet where she's like, I need to completely get out of this situation, but she just needs a safe person to talk to, that's what we do. We meet women right where they're at and just journey together with them. So definitely feel free to utilize Creative Gainesville as a resource. whether you're a student, whether you work in some capacity where you are meeting women who could possibly benefit from our services.
I'm sure. Hi guys, how are you? I just had a question in terms of, for those of us who vote, what are some legal things that we can change? Because I know that from my research, a lot of women don't want to come forward because if their human trafficker goes to jail, he'll be out in 3 years and he'll be out to get them. And for me, if you've been threatening my life the whole time and I've been, willing to be raped 40, 50 times a day for you so that you don't kill my family, putting you away for 3 years is not going to get me to testify against you. So are there things being worked on in terms of destigmatizing prostitution? Because frankly, I don't really think it exists. There are people who were, victims of circumstance, but are there things that we can lobby for in terms of making, getting our laws caught up to what we know psychologically, medically, etc.?
Yes, and thank God for Frank. Frank is doing a phenomenal job. He's an inspiration and a hero. Because one of the things that all of us who work in this area know is that the toughest thing to be able to do is to get a victim to testify. And Frank has done a beautiful job of that. And that's where everybody in this panel right now comes into play. Working together with law enforcement to make sure victims feel comfortable. Because I know there was a case earlier this year or last year where there was a young girl, I think she was 16, who was on trial, and a trafficker walked by and looked at her and said, "I'll be seeing you soon." So making sure that we have harsh penalties, we give law enforcement the tools they need to put traffickers away, but also going after demand, going after the people who buy, making sure that someone who's out, trying to buy sex not only with a child but with an adult, they get a stiff sentence. In some jurisdictions, it's a $50 ticket for having sex with an adult and getting caught. So we have to make sure that we have the legislation in place. And as Frank alluded to, there are still jurisdictions in this country where they don't segregate between adult and juvenile sex trafficking. So we have to make sure we segregate. And I've been so honored to work on legislation at both the congressional and local level. And one of the things that I'm so thrilled about right now is that we're getting legislation right now in Florida to declare pornography a public health crisis. So we can fight that tooth and nail, because it does drive sex trafficking. We can't let our kids learn about relationships by looking at pornography. We've got to intervene and teach them about healthy relationships. But definitely making sure that when we pass legislation that provides aftercare for victims, that it's funded and that it's long-term, and preferably 1 to 3 years, because 90 days isn't enough time. We've got to give, again, as was mentioned previously, there is something that drove them to be vulnerable to being trafficked. I spent 25 years in trauma therapy to find my reason, and I conquered it. I still fight every day, but I conquered it for the most part. So we have to help these victims, address this problem, overcome it, or else they're going to be back on the street again. So we have to have legislation that provides long-term aftercare, that gives law enforcement the tools they need to put these guys away for a long time, confiscate assets, and diminish that image that Frank spoke about with the pimp life, and make sure people understand the horrific nature of this crime. Polaris Project did a study, and they found in some of these lockdown brothels, victims were forced to have sex 20 to 48 times a day. And this is a horrific thing that we have to come together, not only as a community, as a society, as a country, and fight as hard as we can.
Why don't our lawmakers find that as disgusting as I do?
That's a good question. We're in Tallahassee constantly, trying to push forward, legislation, working with Ross Spano and others. But I think, it's always an uphill battle, unfortunately. When you step into the legal arena, there are always hurdles, people who will have a problem with, certain aspects of the bill. The TPVA that passed in Congress, the only reason it passed was they forced them to take out services for LGBTQ individuals, so they let it pass. So there was no services provided. So we've got to, as voters, make sure that our legislators know that we're not going to stand for this, that we want them to do the right thing and to push forward legislation. I'm working right now on what's called SESTA, Stop Enabling Sex Traffickers Act. What we're doing is trying to shut down websites like Backpage.com, who are selling kids on their website and getting away with it because of the Communications Decency Act, Section 230. So we're trying to shut down websites like this, and it's been an uphill battle just to get people to sign on board because the tech lobby is so strong. Google, Twitter, Facebook, citing internet privacy. So we've got to just make sure that we write, email, call, go to the office of our legislators and say, give law enforcement the tools, give victims the resources, let's bring an end to human trafficking.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much again. Can we have another round of applause for our panel? This concludes our main event this evening. I hope you've all learned something, and please do, after the event, come up and shake our guest speakers' hands, look them in the eye, and say thank you for what you're doing to fight human trafficking here locally and around the state of Florida. So without further ado, again, could I ask one more round of applause, and you're ready to go.
If you don't mind, we have a lot of outstanding guests here tonight, but I do want to point out that one of our city commissioners, Sir David Ariola, hope I didn't put you on the spot, sir, but he took time out of his very busy schedule